welcome along. I believe that if you can master these 10 skills of leadership and management, that will generate the momentum needed to get the flywheel of either your leadership and management journey going and building momentum, or if you're an established manager and leader already, but you're having some tricky times with your team, it could help with turning the team around. And what we want to do is really push some momentum into this flywheel. And each item in the framework will build momentum and push forwards into the next item. So we're going to have a quick run through what are the 10 items or skills in the framework. And then at the end, we'll talk a bit about what makes that different, or how to make that different, and how I think of that differently than other learning and development trainings or coaches might characterize them. So here we go. Number 1 is look after yourself. And this is the most underrated leadership skill there is going. And it's foundational, because if you are not looking after yourself, then you're more likely to run into moments of overwhelm. You're more likely to be irritable and make bad decisions, or even worse, no decisions. You are not likely to be doing great leading, because you're going to be in reactive mode, or worse, you're not going to be in any mode. You're just going to be in fight, flight, freeze mode, not doing anything. Number 2 is set and communicate the priority. And I say the priority very purposefully. This is about boiling down what you and your team are responsible for to one priority. I'm not saying that means there shouldn't be lots of activity or related projects or even objectives, really, but this is what is the overarching one priority that keeps you all on the straight and narrow, that becomes the basis of your decision making about what things you should be saying yes and no to. This is the filter that says, does this work stream that we're being asked to get involved with or to deliver impact on the progression of our one thing? If the answer is no, I recommend you say no. If the answer is yes, then go for it if you have capacity and all the rest, which we will come to later on. Number 3 is set and communicate the team values. And these might be the same as the institutional values. They might be slightly different, or they might be a different flavour of the institutional values. So knowing what your one priority is, you then can start to think about how you are working together with your stakeholders and clients and students and senior leaders and anybody who interacts with you, to make sure that you're delivering that one priority in the best possible way. So set and communicate the values. Number 4 is make agreements only. And people who have worked with me one-to-one in a client coaching relationship know that this is one of my favorite things, and I go on about it a lot. I make all my new coaching clients listen to this audio recording of an American master coach talk extensively about agreements versus expectations. The idea being that if you co-create agreements with people, they are more likely to stick to them, and you are able to have much better accountability conversations on the basis of what was agreed than on the basis of what you expected but maybe didn't communicate, or where they didn't agree to whatever that expectation is. So make agreements, not have expectations. Number 5 is master decision making. And this one is interesting. This is one of the really pivotal shifts that happens when people step into those more senior management and leadership roles, is all of a sudden you have to start making decisions more than you have to be doing the do. And so there can be some tricky, slippery stuff in decision making. That's why it's a key part of this framework. Number 6 is hone delegation. So this is about knowing how to delegate well and how to really set your team up for success so that they can be delivering what you need them to deliver, so that they can be developing as a result of the things that you're delegating to them, so that they can see the value of what you're delegating, and so that ultimately you can get the results that you need and be moving the team and institution forward in the right direction. Number 7 is having really good quality accountability and feedback conversations. And this can be a tricky spot for people. So it's a really important part of the process, because once you've honed this skill, then a lot of other things start to get easier when you step out of fear of difficult conversations and into a sense of groundedness about your ability to prepare for and have difficult conversations. Then things start to open up. And when you understand that confrontation is just neutral, it's not good or bad, it's just neutral, and sometimes actually it's necessary, all of a sudden things get a bit easier and you can get unhooked from a lot of that fear and uncertainty that can arise in leadership and management. Number 8 is the big one, but it's one that's really important and not enough people do, which is properly addressing poor performance. And hopefully you can begin to see now why I characterize this framework as a flywheel, because if you have been working with agreements, if you've been delegating really well, and if you've mastered the accountability and feedback conversations, you should find that poor performance isn't such a big deal for your team, because everybody knows what to do and hopefully is just getting on and doing what those things are. However, you also then, through that comfort with the accountability and feedback conversations, you as the leader and manager are operating more from your grounded, healthy adult self who's able to deal with poor performance, really catch it early and fine tune and work with your people, get really curious about what's going on for them so that you can help them to improve, or if necessary, move on. I think in higher education there's a real tendency to believe that it's impossible to fire people, or that it's wrong to tell people that they're in the wrong job, basically. But actually it can be a really, really compassionate conversation to have with people to let them know that they might thrive better somewhere else. We will get to that in due course. Number 9 is about fostering psychological safety and a sense of belonging in your team. Now, this one, again, is an impact of that flywheel that we're starting to create some momentum with. What we want to be doing here is really helping people to know that their voices are heard, that their opinions are valuable and will be listened to, and that even when you disagree or have to make a different choice, that those people have been included and that it's about the work rather than about the individual. And again, we'll talk a little bit more at the end about my approach to this and how it might seem different than some other people. And number 10 is establishing trust as the basis of your team culture. So trust, I like to use Brené Brown's Braving Inventory, which is her breakdown of the constituent parts of trust. And I find it really, really helpful. And it can be really useful to do an audit of yourself and how trusting you are with yourself. I think often trust with self is the first place this can break down. So that might show up with things like, well, I always tell myself that I'm going to get healthy, but then, in the evening, partner offers me an ice cream and I think, oh, okay, yeah. And then that's it, gone. So things like, how reliable are you with yourself? How much do you hold boundaries with yourself? All of those kind of things. So it starts with self and then it builds out from there. And what we want to do, this is kind of really closely related to psychological safety and belonging, but we want to be demonstrating and curating trust as the basis of your team culture. All right, so those are the 10 parts of the flywheel. Hopefully you can see that they're all related, interrelated, and build momentum into each other. And then the final piece of the puzzle, I suppose, really, is when things start to get hard, what do? How do we keep you on course? How do we keep you centered in that grounded, healthy adult self? Well, that kicks you back up to number 1, which is looking after yourself. So I said I would talk about how I am approaching this differently and what might make this framework different than other models or teaching frameworks about leadership and management. And the difference here is I look at each of those 10 building blocks of the flywheel or pieces of the flywheel through a person-centered and trauma-informed lens. So when I'm thinking about developing those 10 pieces, I always start with centering yourself as the leader or manager, which I know I just need to clear up something here. So in a lot of EDI type of work, there's conversation about decentering whiteness, middle classness, straight, like heterosexualness, all of those characteristics that are sort of normative characteristics. It's like, well, we have to decenter that and center the other characteristics. That's not what I'm talking about here when I'm talking about person-centered. What I'm talking about is the physical and emotional centering of yourself. So instead of coming right forward in a kind of fighty mode or leaning back in a very passive, deflated mode, this is about finding your center and leading from there. So emotionally, it's the same way. It's finding that grounded center of your being so that you can work from there, so that you cannot be pulled off in different directions, knocked off course by the urgency that can come down the line from senior managers, or distracted and really thrown into an emotional state by things like bad behavior in your team, things like that, so that you are leading and managing from your healthy adult self. So that first part is about centering yourself in a person-centered approach. The next piece is about centering the other person. So this is about being very, very curious about what the other person's experience is and about holding other people with unconditional positive regard, which is a concept that's developed in counselling, person-centered counselling approaches. And it's about being able to be generous in your assumptions and holding the other person with positive regard, unconditional of what their behaviour has been, and about working with them as a whole person, rather than being caught up in judgment and punitive types of behaviour. So that's the other part. Then when we think about so that's person-centered, the next piece is about layering over trauma-informed approaches. And this is really key as well, because as we're building that flywheel, what we want to be doing is, number 1, addressing your own trauma. And I know not everybody will identify with the concept of trauma and be like, well, nothing really bad has ever happened to me. However, it might be that for you, if that's your experience, and you think, well, trauma is not really a big deal for me, then you might think about things, those pivotal moments in life where you've made decisions about how the world is and how you need to show up so that you can be safe and included and accepted by the group of people around you. So that's typically things like, well, I understood when I was little that I needed to be nice and polite and to not have big emotional reactions to things because that would upset the adults in my family. So actually, I'm very calm. What that can mean, though, is that you might be somebody who suppresses anger, or you might not be very good at confrontation because of that fear that your reactions or the other person's reactions will be so strong that it will end up in shouting and aggression and things that you have been conditioned and have understood are not acceptable, and you don't really know how to cope with those things. That's an example. There are many other examples that we can talk to as these videos go on. But that's a key example. So that's number one, is dealing with looking at your own trauma. And so some of the work that we might need to do is about checking in with what are your typical responses to things, and are they from being driven by your healthy adult self, or are they being driven by your protective patterns, behavior, things that you have learned that you need to do in order to keep yourself safe in some past life, but are not actually doing that for you now. Then when we start to apply the trauma-informed lens across your team, it's about not digging into other people's trauma. That would be inappropriate, and it would be outside of your scope of practice as a leader and manager. That's not really okay, because you're not a therapist. You're not really trained to do those kinds of things. What it does mean is accepting and making space for the fact that other people have a history and a backstory and will have views, opinions, and beliefs that are grounded in what they have already experienced in life. And that might not match with your views, opinions, and beliefs and things that you have learned through your life. So again, by holding that healthy adult center, by holding your own center, you can be much more curious and create more space for other people's trauma responses. So that is those things like, well, they might be petrified of confrontation if they've grown up in a house with, I don't know, let's say they grew up in a home with abusive parents that were shouty. They might really find confrontation very, very, very difficult. So this is a trauma-informed approach, is going, okay, how can I keep myself safe and grounded and healthy? And then how can I create the conditions within the team for my team members to engage in work in a way that feels, I'm hesitant to use the word safe because it's really difficult to do that, and we don't know what other people might experience as safe or not safe. But how can you create the environment for your team members to feel courageous? Let's go with that. So that they can feel able to share what is useful to share, so that they can feel able to bring their ideas, their fears, their frustrations, their whole person to the experience in a way that helps you all to get on together, to make progress on the things that you need to progress with, and to not get caught up in those cyclonic thought processes that can keep us awake at night, and instead be able to rest and relax and have a nice life outside of work. All of that stuff overlays these 10 different framework pieces of the flywheel. So that hopefully you can see it. You can see how clearly communicating what the priority and the values are can really help people to get on board with what you're trying to achieve and how. Then there is delegating really well. So helping people to understand what you need them to do and what timeframes are and what the escalation points are. And when things go wrong, what should they do about it? And how can you support them when things start to go wrong? And how to be having feedback conversations and unpicking some of those dynamics about, is this that something went wrong in a process, or is this that something went wrong in a relationship and somebody's upset? And which type of conversation do we need to have on that basis? And knowing a lot of those nuances will help you and your team to feel much more courageous and centered and able to get on and do the things you need to do, and then leave work and have a nice life. Okay, that was a run through my framework. I hope you found it helpful. Future videos will begin to break down each of those 10 pieces of the flywheel framework and look at how do you actually do this, because there are some different things that we need to sort of weave together to make a really successful leadership and management journey for you, which include how are you working with your own views, opinions, and beliefs about each of those things and what is possible for you and for your team, with how do you develop the skills that you need to be able to actually have those conversations, set those pieces of work in motion, be holding people accountable when things have gone awry, and so on. So there's a views, opinions, and beliefs bit. There's a skills bit, and there's also a strategy bit, which is really about sort of looking at the much bigger picture of your team and department and careers and person development, and going, okay, so all of these things are going on. Now, how do we fit all of that together with the fact that we've got human beings in the team who need development and care and all of that stuff? I hope that sounds good and that you found this video useful. If you enjoyed it, I really encourage you to share with people in your team, in your network, with friends, family. I would love for you to send this to them, and maybe we can all have a big conversation about which bits of it work, which bits of it are tricky and slippery, and be learning together. Thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.